The town of Silverbridge sat in a valley surrounded by tall pine trees. It was the second Friday of November. The town square had a wooden dance floor built right over the grass. Heavy strings of yellow lights hung from the branches. A local band played guitars and an upright bass near the steps of the town hall. The music was lively, and the crowd was loud. The air was cold, carrying the smell of roasted corn and wood smoke. Tessa stood behind a long folding table near the edge of the square. She wore a thick wool sweater and a green scarf. She worked as a third-grade teacher at the local elementary school. Tonight, she volunteered to pour hot chocolate into small paper cups for the families. Because she spent her days watching a classroom full of children, she had a habit of scanning the edges of any room she was in. She always looked for the quiet ones, the kids who did not know where to stand or what to do. She saw Ivy standing by a wooden light post far away from the music. Ivy was 8 years old. She wore a thin gray dress that had faded at the seams. The dress was useless against the November wind. Her brown shoes were scuffed, and the left shoe had a broken strap that hung loose. Ivy stood perfectly still. She kept her hands stuffed into her pockets. She watched the other children run around the wooden dance floor. The people at the front gate gave a green paper ticket to every child who walked in. The ticket was meant for a partner dance later in the evening. Ivy held her green ticket tightly in her left hand. She looked at it, then looked back at the dance floor. A group of boys chased each other past the light post. One of the taller boys bumped hard into Ivy. He hit her shoulder. He did not stop running. He did not look back or say he was sorry. Ivy stumbled backward. She pulled her arms tight across her chest to block the cold wind. She looked down at her broken shoe. She let out a long breath and spoke very softly to the empty space beside her. "Nobody wants to dance with me," she said. Tessa heard the small voice. She put down the pitcher of hot chocolate. She wiped her hands on a towel and took a step forward. She wanted to help the girl find a partner. But before Tessa could cross the grass, a man stepped out of the shadows under the pine trees. His name was Caspian. He lived in the large house at the end of the town line. He paid for the wooden dance floor and the string lights every year, but he never made a speech or asked for a thank you. He was tall, and his hair was completely white, though his face did not look old. His skin was very pale. He wore a long black coat. Caspian had heard the whisper too. His hearing was much sharper than a normal person. He walked across the grass with slow, quiet steps. People naturally stepped out of his way without even realizing they were doing it. Caspian stopped in front of Ivy. He knelt down so he was level with her eyes. He did not move too fast. Ivy looked up. She saw his bright white hair. She did not run away. She just watched his face. She had a habit of reading adults to see if they were angry. Caspian did not look angry. He looked completely calm. Caspian reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a spare green paper ticket and held it flat on his open hand. "I have a ticket," Caspian said. His voice was steady and quiet. "But I do not have anyone to use it with. Will you help me use it?" Ivy looked at the green paper. She looked at his pale face. She slowly reached out and took the ticket. Her small fingers brushed against his hand. His skin was cold, like river water in the winter. She did not pull away. She just nodded her head once. They walked onto the wooden floor together. The band started playing a slow song. Caspian held out his hand, keeping a respectful distance. Ivy placed her hand in his. She stood up straight and looked down at her feet. She began to count her steps out loud, but very quietly. 1, 2, 1, 2, she whispered. Caspian matched her small steps perfectly. He did not rush her. Around them, some people noticed the quiet man dancing with the little girl, but soon they turned back to their own conversations. The mayor danced with his wife. A grandfather danced with his 2 granddaughters. The moment blended into the rest of the evening. When the song finished, Ivy stepped back and dropped her hand. She stood up a little taller than before. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you," Caspian replied. He gave a small nod. He walked her back to the table where Tessa was standing. He bought Ivy a cup of hot chocolate and handed it to her. Ivy took the cup with both hands and let the heat warm her fingers. Tessa looked at Caspian. She noticed how pale his hands were in the yellow light. "That was a nice thing to do," Tessa said. She offered him a warm smile. Caspian looked at her. His eyes were dark and steady. "She needed someone to notice her," he said. He looked at Tessa for a few seconds longer than normal. Then he turned and walked back into the dark shadows beneath the trees. Tessa watched him go, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over her. She watched Ivy take a slow sip of her drink, and she knew she had to keep an eye on this little girl. The following week at school, Tessa watched Ivy walk into the classroom on Monday morning. Ivy walked slowly. She tried not to put weight on her left foot. She went straight to her desk near the window and opened her reading book. During the quiet study hour, Tessa walked down the row of desks. She looked down and saw a red mark on Ivy's heel. The broken strap on the brown shoe rubbed against her skin every time she took a step. Tessa went to her desk and found a small bandage. She walked back and handed it to Ivy. "Put this on your heel," Tessa said quietly. Ivy took the bandage. "I am sorry," she said quickly. She always said she was sorry before she did anything. She acted like taking up space was against the rules. Tessa knew Ivy lived with her aunt, Nancy. Nancy took Ivy in 2 years ago after Ivy's mother passed away. During her lunch break, Tessa sat in the empty classroom and called Nancy on the phone. She wanted to ask about the shoes and see if she could help. The phone rang 4 times before Nancy answered. Her voice sounded tired and annoyed. "What is it?" Nancy asked. "Hello, this is Tessa, Ivy's teacher," Tessa said. "I am calling because Ivy has a bad blister on her heel. Her shoes are broken. I was wondering if I could help you find a new pair for her." "I work long hours to pay the rent," Nancy said loudly. "I do not have time to go shopping for shoes. She can just wear thick socks. Do not tell me how to raise my kid." Before Tessa could say another word, Nancy hung up the phone. The line went dead. Tessa let out a frustrated sigh. She placed the phone on her desk and wrote a note in Ivy's student file. She had to document everything she saw. She wrote down the date, the broken shoe, and the phone call. After school ended, Tessa felt tired. She walked down the street to the local diner. The air was cold, and she wanted a cup of hot tea. She pushed the heavy glass door open. The small bell above the door rang. She ordered a green tea at the counter from Mabel, the owner, and turned around to find a seat. Caspian sat at a small table in the back corner. He had a cup of dark liquid in front of him. He looked up and saw Tessa. He pulled out the empty chair across from him. Tessa walked over and sat down. She unbuttoned her coat and wrapped her hands around her warm cup. "You look upset," Caspian said. He did not ask how her day was. He got straight to the point. Tessa held her warm cup. "It is the little girl from the dance," she said. "Ivy. She has bad blisters on her feet from her broken shoes. I called her aunt to talk about it, but her aunt just yelled at me and hung up. I do not know what to do." Caspian watched her face. "Her aunt gets a check from the county every month to take care of her," he said. It was not a question. It was a fact. "Yes," Tessa said, "but none of that money goes to Ivy. I want to buy her shoes, but if I do, her aunt will get angry. She will think I am insulting her, and she might take it out on Ivy." Caspian tapped his long fingers on the wooden table. He thought for a minute. "I will buy the boots. I will put them in a plain box and send them to the school office. You can tell the girl they came from a donation drive. Her aunt will not know who bought them." Tessa smiled. The tension in her shoulders faded away. "Thank you, Caspian. That is very kind." Caspian looked at her smile. His quiet face relaxed a little. "You pay close attention to the people around you," he said. "I just think kids deserve to feel safe," Tessa said. She looked at his hands resting on the table. They looked like carved marble. "Your hands look freezing. Do you want me to order you a hot coffee?" "No," Caspian said softly. "I do not get cold. But thank you." He stood up, left a $5 bill on the table for a tip, and walked out of the diner. Tessa watched him walk down the street without a hat or a scarf. She wondered how a person could ignore the bitter wind so easily, but she was just glad he was willing to help. On Thursday morning, a heavy white box arrived at the school office. There was no name on the return address. The secretary handed it to Tessa. Tessa carried the box into her classroom before the kids arrived. She set it on the corner of Ivy's desk. When the bell rang, Ivy walked in and sat down. She looked at the white box, but she kept her hands folded in her lap. She did not touch it. "What is this?" Ivy asked. She looked at Tessa. "It is a donation," Tessa said gently. "Someone sent it for you to use. You can open it." Ivy slowly reached out and lifted the lid. Inside the box sat a pair of thick winter boots. They were black, lined with soft gray material inside. Ivy touched the lining with one finger. Then she pulled her hand back fast, like the boots were hot. "I cannot take these," Ivy said. She pushed the box away toward the edge of the desk. "Why not?" Tessa asked. She sat down in the empty chair next to Ivy. "Aunt Nancy says new things cost money. If I bring these home, she will yell. She will say the school wants her to pay for them, and we do not have money for that." Ivy looked down at her hands. She started picking at her fingernails. Tessa felt a sharp pain in her chest. She did not force the issue. She knew pushing would only make Ivy more scared. "Okay," Tessa said. "I will leave them in the closet for now. You do not have to take them home." When school ended, Ivy put her broken shoes back on and walked home in the cold. Tessa watched her walk down the sidewalk. Tessa drove back to the diner, hoping Caspian would be there. He was sitting in the exact same booth. He wore the same dark coat. Tessa sat across from him and told him what happened with the boots. "She is scared of what the gift will cost her," Caspian said quietly. He did not look surprised. "We need the social worker to see how her aunt treats her," Tessa said. "But a broken shoe is not enough proof to remove a child from a home. The county needs to see a pattern of bad behavior. They need to see how Nancy talks to her." Caspian looked out the window at the gray sky. "Then we will give them a reason to look closer," he said. "Set up a meeting. Bring Ivy here to the diner after school tomorrow. Tell her you want to buy her a bowl of soup. I will make sure the social worker is sitting in the room when you arrive." Tessa agreed. She trusted him. The next day, Tessa told Ivy they were going to get soup after the final bell. Ivy just nodded. She never asked why adults did things. She just followed directions to stay out of trouble. Friday afternoon brought heavy clouds and a cold drizzle. Tessa walked with Ivy down the sidewalk toward the diner. Ivy held her backpack tight against her chest with both arms. She constantly checked the street and the parked cars. She walked carefully to avoid the puddles. They reached the diner. Tessa opened the door. The bell rang. Ivy stopped in the doorway and took a deep breath before she stepped inside. Caspian was sitting in his usual back booth. He wore his long black coat. Ivy walked to the booth and sat down across from him. She kept her backpack on her lap. Caspian pushed a bowl of warm chicken soup across the table. "Hello, Ivy," he said. "Hello," she answered. She looked at the soup, but she did not pick up the spoon. "You can eat this," he said. "I ordered too much." In the corner booth near the door, a man named Mr. Gable sat quietly. He was the county social worker. He drank a cup of black coffee and read a newspaper. He watched Ivy. He wrote notes on a small pad. He noted how she sat stiffly. He noted how she gripped the backpack like a shield. Caspian took a slow sip of his dark drink. "Why did you send the boots?" Ivy asked him. She looked right at him. "Your feet look cold," Caspian said. Ivy stirred her soup. "Adults only give things when people are watching," she said. "Or when they want something back from you." Caspian set his cup down. "That has been your experience," he said. "But it is not the rule for everyone." Before Ivy could take a bite, the bell above the door rang hard. The heavy door slammed against the wall. Nancy walked in. Her face was red and her jaw was tight. She saw Ivy and walked fast toward the booth. Ivy froze completely. She dropped her spoon into the bowl. She pulled her backpack higher to cover her chest. "What are you doing with my kid?" Nancy yelled. Her loud voice filled the diner. The other customers stopped eating and stared. Caspian did not stand up. He looked up at Nancy. His face was completely still. "We are having soup," he said quietly. "She belongs at home doing her chores," Nancy snapped. She reached out and grabbed Ivy hard by the upper arm. She pulled with a lot of force. Ivy slid out of the booth without making a single sound. She let her aunt drag her toward the door. She did not fight back. Mr. Gable stood up from the corner booth. He wrote down everything he saw. He saw the tight grip on the girl's arm. He saw the pure fear in Ivy's eyes. He saw the way Nancy ignored everyone else in the room. Nancy pushed the door open and dragged Ivy out into the rain. The door swung shut. The diner went silent. Caspian looked at Tessa. Tessa was shaking with anger and sadness. Caspian reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. His hand was freezing, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "We have what we need now," he said softly. Tessa looked into his eyes and squeezed his hand, feeling a sudden wave of comfort in the cold. On Monday morning, Tessa and Caspian met with Mr. Gable at the county office. The office was small and smelled like stale coffee, Mr. Gable sat behind his desk and opened a thick yellow folder. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the papers. "I saw the grip on the girl's arm, mister," Gable said. "I also spent the weekend checking the county records. Nancy collects the survivor benefits every month, but Ivy has missed 3 dentist appointments this year. She comes to school without a winter coat. She has untreated blisters. It is a clear pattern of neglect and verbal abuse." "What is the next step?" Tessa asked. She leaned forward in her chair. "I will file for an emergency order to remove Ivy from the house," Mr. Gable said. "But we need a temporary placement home. The local foster system is full right now. She might have to go to a group home in another town far away." Caspian sat up straight. "She will not leave Silverbridge. I will take her." Mr. Gable looked at Caspian. "You live alone, Caspian. You have a large house, but you have no experience raising children. The county will need to inspect your home and run a background check. You have to prove you can provide a safe space." "Run the check," Caspian said. "Inspect every room. I have plenty of space. I can provide food, clothing, and a quiet place for her to sleep. I will sign whatever papers you have." Mr. Gable nodded slowly. "I will start the paperwork today. It will take a few days to get a judge to sign it. Until then, Ivy has to stay with Nancy." That evening, Tessa drove to Caspian's house to help him prepare a bedroom. The heavy iron gates opened as she pulled into the long driveway. The house was massive, built from dark gray stone. It sat on top of a hill surrounded by trees. Caspian opened the front door and led her inside. The living room was beautiful, filled with tall bookshelves and thick rugs, but it felt empty and cold. "We need to make a room feel like a kid lives there," Tessa said. She looked around the large space. "She needs warm blankets, a reading lamp, and maybe some books." "We need to buy cereal and milk," Caspian nodded. "I will go to the store tomorrow and buy everything on your list." Tessa walked into the kitchen. The counters were completely clean. There was no food anywhere. No bread, no fruit, no coffee maker. "Caspian, do you ever eat?" she asked. "I only ever see you drink from a thermos at the diner." Caspian stopped walking. He turned around and looked at Tessa. The room was very quiet. He took a step closer to her. "I do not eat regular food," Caspian said. "If you are going to bring a child into my home, you should know the truth about me." Tessa stood still. She looked at his pale face. "What is the truth?" "I have lived in this town for a very long time," Caspian said. "Long before the roads were paved with asphalt. I do not walk in the bright sun. My skin is always cold. I drink a medical substitute that I order from a blood bank in the city. I do not sleep." Tessa looked at him. She thought about his strength, his quiet nature, and his cold hands. She put the pieces together in her mind. "You are a vampire," she said. She did not yell. She did not run. She just stated a fact. "Yes," he said. He waited for her to turn around and leave. He expected her to be afraid. Tessa did not run. She walked closer to him. She reached out and took his hand. It was as cold as ice, but she held it tightly. "Do you hurt people?" she asked. "No," Caspian said softly. "I stopped hurting people centuries ago. I only want to live in peace. I watch the town, but I do not harm anyone." Tessa looked at his hand holding hers. "Ivy needs peace too, I trust you, Caspian. I know you will keep her safe." Caspian looked down at her warm hand. A small, genuine smile appeared on his face. It was the first time she had seen him truly smile. "Thank you, Tessa." They stood there in the quiet kitchen, the cold and the warmth mixing between their fingers. Tessa knew this was a huge secret, but she felt completely safe standing next to him. The paperwork took 4 long days. On Thursday afternoon, Tessa was in the middle of a math lesson when the school principal walked into her classroom. The principal looked very worried. "Tessa, Nancy just came to the front office," the principal said. "She signed a paper and took Ivy out of school early. She told me they are packing the car and moving out of state today." Tessa dropped her chalk. It hit the floor and broke. She ran out of the classroom and down the hall. She pushed the heavy school doors open. The parking lot was empty. She pulled out her phone and called Caspian. Her hands were shaking. "Nancy took her," Tessa said. "She knows the county is investigating. She is running away right now." "I am leaving my house now," Caspian said. His voice was completely calm. "I will pick you up at the school gates. Go outside." 5 minutes later, Caspian's dark car pulled up to the school. Tessa ran out and got into the passenger seat. Caspian drove fast. He did not look at the speed limit signs. He just focused on the road ahead. "Which way did they go?" Tessa asked. "The highway heading south," Caspian said. "It is the only fast road out of the valley. We will catch them." The sky grew dark and heavy rain started to fall. The rain hit the windshield so hard that the wipers could barely clear the water. Caspian rolled down his window. The cold rain blew into the car, hitting his face. "What are you doing?" "You will get soaked," Tessa said. She tried to pull her coat tight. Caspian did not answer. He closed his eyes for 2 seconds. He was listening. He was using senses Tessa did not have. He could hear the sound of the rain hitting the asphalt, the wind blowing through the pine trees, and the engines of the cars miles ahead. He smelled the exhaust fumes. He drove for 10 miles down the highway. Then, he suddenly hit the brakes and pulled the car over to the muddy shoulder of the road. "Wait in the car," he said. He opened his door. "No, I am coming with you," Tessa said. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out into the freezing rain. They walked quickly down the muddy edge of the road. Tessa followed right behind him. The rain soaked through her clothes. Near the tree line, sitting on a wet fallen log, was a small figure. It was Ivy. She wore her thin gray dress. Her backpack was on her lap. She only had one shoe on. Her other foot was covered by a wet, muddy sock. She looked tiny against the large trees. Tessa ran to her. "Ivy," Ivy looked up. Her lips were blue and she was shivering uncontrollably. "I opened the car door when she stopped for gas," Ivy said. Her teeth chattered as she spoke. "I ran into the trees and walked back along the highway. I hid in the bushes. I did not want to leave my town." Caspian took off his long black coat. He wrapped it around Ivy's small shoulders. The coat was huge on her, but it was dry and thick. He picked her up in his arms. She weighed almost nothing to him. "You do not have to leave," Caspian said. "You are safe now. We are going home." They walked back to the car. Caspian turned the heater on as high as it would go. He drove them back to Silverbridge. Mr. Gable was waiting at the police station. When he saw Ivy covered in mud and freezing, he signed the emergency placement order right there on the front desk. The police sent a car to find Nancy at the gas station. Nancy would not be allowed to come near Ivy again. Caspian drove them to the large stone house. Tessa helped Ivy take a warm bath to get the mud off her legs and feet. She gave Ivy a large, soft shirt to sleep in. Caspian had prepared the bedroom at the end of the hall. It had a thick blue quilt on the bed and a small reading lamp on the desk. He had bought the cereal and milk, just like Tessa asked. Ivy sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the heavy wooden door. She pulled the quilt up around her waist. "I will leave the door open a little bit," Tessa said, "and I will sleep in the guest room tonight. Caspian is downstairs. He will make sure nobody comes inside." I lay down and pulled the blue quilt up to her chin. "Does he ever sleep?" she asked. Her eyes were heavy. "Not really," Tessa said, smiling softly. "He will stay awake and make sure the house is perfectly safe. You can close your eyes now." Ivy closed her eyes. For the first time in 2 years, she did not say she was sorry. She just let herself fall asleep. Tessa stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the little girl breathe slowly and deeply. The first few weeks at the stone house were quiet and slow. They had to build a completely new routine. Ivy woke up early every day. Caspian placed the new black boots outside her door on the very first morning. She put them on without asking questions. She wore them to school every day. They fit perfectly and kept her feet warm. Tessa came over every afternoon when the final bell rang. She helped Ivy with her reading homework at the large kitchen table. The huge stone house slowly started to change. It did not feel so empty anymore. Ivy left her crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator. She left her spelling books on the sofa in the living room. She started leaving her backpack on a chair instead of carrying it around all the time. One evening, Tessa decided it was time to teach Caspian how to cook a real meal. They stood in the kitchen while Ivy was upstairs reading. "Ivy needs to eat hot dinners, and we cannot order pizza every night," Tessa said. She tied a white apron around Caspian's waist. He looked very serious. "I have not cooked food since the 1800s, Caspian said. "I will probably ruin it. I do not even know how to use this oven." "It is just macaroni and cheese," Tessa laughed. "You boil the water, add the pasta, and stir in the cheese. It is very simple. I will show you." Caspian boiled the water carefully. He poured the pasta into the pot. He watched it closely. But then Tessa asked him a question about his past, and he turned his head to look at her. He forgot to turn the heat down. The water boiled over the sides of the pot, hitting the hot burner. Thick white smoke filled the kitchen. Caspian quickly grabbed the pot off the stove and moved it to the sink. Ivy walked into the kitchen. She smelled the smoke. She saw the mess on the stove. She stopped walking immediately. She waited for Caspian to yell. She waited for him to throw the pot against the wall. Nancy always threw things when she ruined a dinner. Ivy braced herself. Caspian just washed his hands in the sink. He looked at Ivy. "I am a very bad cook," he said calmly. He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. Ivy looked at him. Then she let out a small laugh. It was a quiet sound, but it filled the whole room. Tessa smiled. She wiped the stove clean and started a new pot of water. They ate the food 30 minutes later, and nobody yelled. Later that night, Ivy went up to her room to sleep. Tessa and Caspian sat on the back porch. The moon was bright, and the air was cold. Caspian sat very close to Tessa on the wooden bench. He watched the stars above the pine trees. "She laughed today," Caspian said. His voice was full of wonder. "She feels safe with you," Tessa said. "You gave her a solid floor to stand on. You gave her a place where she does not have to be afraid to make a mistake." Caspian looked at Tessa. "You gave her the warmth she needed. I only provided the walls and the roof. You made this building a home. I do not think I could do this without you." Tessa looked down at her hands resting in her lap. "I like being here. I like spending my evenings with her. And with you." Caspian slowly reached out and touched her cheek. His fingers were cold, but his touch was incredibly gentle and careful. Tessa leaned into his hand. She looked up into his quiet eyes. "I have lived a very long time in the dark," Caspian whispered. "I thought I preferred the quiet. I thought I was meant to be alone. But then you walked over to my table at the diner, and everything changed." Tessa smiled. She closed the distance between them. She kissed him. His lips were cool, but the kiss was deep and full of quiet longing. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her carefully as if she were something precious he had finally found after centuries of searching. They sat on the porch for a long time, watching the wind blow through the pine trees. They did not need to talk. The silence between them was comfortable and safe. Winter arrived in Silverbridge. Heavy snow fell over the town, covering the roads and the roofs in thick white powder. The schools closed for 2 days because the plows could not clear the streets fast enough. The stone house stayed warm. Caspian kept a fire burning in the living room fireplace every single night. He chopped the wood himself and stacked it near the back door. One Tuesday night, the wind howled loudly outside the windows. The branches of the trees scraped against the glass. Ivy woke up from a terrible nightmare. She dreamed she was back on the highway, running in the freezing rain, and Nancy's car was right behind her. She dreamed the car was getting closer, and she could not run fast enough. Ivy sat up in bed, breathing fast and hard. She was sweating. She walked out into the dark hallway. She went down the wooden stairs and saw the orange light from the fireplace. Caspian was sitting in his large leather chair. He held a small block of wood and a carving knife. Tessa was sitting on the rug next to him, reading a novel. She had stayed over because the snow was too deep to drive her car home safely. Ivy walked into the living room. Caspian looked up immediately. He set his sharp knife down on the side table. "Bad dream?" he asked softly. Ivy nodded. She walked over and sat on the rug next to Tessa. Tessa wrapped an arm around her shoulder and pulled her close. She kissed the top of Ivy's head. "I do not sleep," Caspian said, "so I make small things to pass the time when the house is quiet." He handed the small block of wood to Ivy. It was a perfectly carved wooden bear. The wood was smooth and warm from his hands. Ivy ran her thumb over the bear's round ears. She looked at the fire. "My mother used to sing a song to me when it rained hard," Ivy whispered. She had never talked about her mother in this house before tonight. It was a hard topic for her. "Do you remember the words?" Tessa asked. "Yes," Ivy said, "but I do not want to sing it all by myself. It makes me sad to sing it alone." Tessa stroked Ivy's hair. "Tell me the words. We will sing it with you. You are not alone." Ivy whispered the words of the short song. It was a simple song about a little bird waiting for the morning light to come. Tessa listened, and then she began to sing. Her voice was sweet and clear in the quiet room. Caspian joined in. His voice was deep and steady, grounding the melody. They sat by the warm fire, singing the song together. They sang it 3 times until Ivy stopped shaking. She leaned against Tessa's shoulder and fell fast asleep. Caspian picked her up gently and carried her back upstairs to her bed. In February, the final court date arrived. The snow was still falling outside the courthouse windows. Mr. Gable presented the entire case to the judge. The files showed everything clearly. The missed dentist visits, the stolen money, the emergency run on the highway in the rain. Nancy sat across the room, but she had nothing to say to defend herself. The evidence was too strong. The judge read the papers. He looked at Ivy, who sat between Tessa and Caspian. Then he signed the final documents. Nancy lost all custody rights forever. Caspian was named Ivy's permanent and legal guardian. The judge hit his gavel, and it was over. When they walked out of the courthouse, the snow was falling lightly from a gray sky. The air felt clean and sharp. Ivy held Tessa's hand on her left side, and she held Caspian's hand on her right side. They walked down the street to the town bakery to celebrate. Caspian bought them cups of hot chocolate and large sugar cookies. He drank his dark liquid from his thermos. Tessa looked at him across the small table. They did not need to say anything out loud. The court papers just proved what they already knew in their hearts. They were a real family now. The stone house was a true home, and no one could ever take it apart. They spent the rest of the afternoon watching the snow fall, safe and warm inside the bakery. The autumn festival returned to Silverbridge. It had been exactly 1 year since Caspian walked out of the dark shadows and handed Ivy the green ticket. The leaves turned brown and fell on the streets again. The string lights hung from the branches of the tall pine trees. The wooden dance floor sat in the center of the town square, right over the grass. The band played a cheerful song. The air was cold, crisp, smelled of roasted apples. Tessa did not stand behind the hot chocolate table this year. She stood near the edge of the dance floor. She wore a warm red coat and a white scarf. She looked at the crowd, smiling at her students who ran past. Ivy stood next to her. Ivy was 9 years old now. She wore a beautiful green sweater and her warm black boots. Her face was healthy, and she smiled constantly as she watched the people dance. She did not hold her shoulders tight anymore. She did not look at the ground when people walked past her. She stood tall and confident. Caspian stood on Tessa's other side. He wore his long black coat. His white hair caught the glow of the yellow string lights. He watched the townspeople gather. He felt completely at peace with his life. He did not feel the need to hide in the shadows anymore. Ivy reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small, faded green paper ticket. It was the exact same ticket from 1 year ago. She had kept it safe in a small wooden box on her desk. She held it up to Caspian. "You promised me a real dance," Ivy said. "The first one was just practice. This time, I do not have to count my steps." Caspian looked at the faded green paper. He looked at the confident, happy girl standing in front of him. He reached out and gently took the ticket, slipping it into his pocket. He held out his hand. "I am ready," Caspian said. Ivy placed her hand in his. They walked together onto the wooden floor. The band started playing a slow, steady song. Caspian and Ivy stepped in time with the music. Ivy did not look down at her feet. She looked out at the lights and smiled widely. She spun around when Caspian lifted her hand. Tessa watched them. Her heart felt completely full. When the song ended, Ivy hugged Caspian tightly and ran off to join a group of friends near the games. She did not look back to see if it was okay. She just knew she was safe to play. Caspian walked back to Tessa. The band started playing another slow song. Caspian held out his hand to her. "Will you dance with me?" he asked. Tessa smiled and took his hand. He pulled her close. His touch was cold, but it felt exactly like home. They swayed to the music under the bright string lights. Tessa rested her head against his chest. She listened to the quiet, slow rhythm of his breathing. As they moved across the floor, Tessa watched the town spinning gently around them. She thought about how much a life could change in just 1 single year. She used to believe that love was a loud and complicated thing, something that demanded to be seen and proven every day with big gestures. Now she understood that true care was quiet. It was the simple choice to keep the hallway light on when the night felt too dark. It was the patience to burn a pot of macaroni and laughed about it instead of walking away in anger. It was a man with centuries of silence, choosing to carve a small wooden toy just to chase a bad dream from a child's mind. Healing did not happen with a magic spell or a grand promise. It happened in the daily routines, in the warm cups of soup, and in the steady, unchanging presence of someone who simply refused to leave. Tessa held on to Caspian's hand, feeling the solid strength in his grip, and she knew that no matter how many autumns passed, they would face the changing seasons together. They had built a quiet sanctuary out of broken pieces, and for the first time in all their lives, they were exactly where they were meant to be. They had found their light in the dark, and they would never let it go.